what we believe will be our strong point is to manage the complexity even the IT complexity at the client side with a more simplistic viewpoint and this seamless integration of the printing devices into those AI workflows.
Hello and welcome to In the Spotlight with Quocirca, the definitive podcast on digital disruption in the print industry. I'm Louella Fernandes, CEO of Quocirca, and this series is brought to you in collaboration with Microsoft Universal Print. Today we're celebrating a milestone with Konica Minolta, the 20th anniversary of its bizhub brand. Over the past 2 decades, bizhub MFPs and printers have become an integral part for many organisations, but the workplace has fundamentally changed. I'm joined by Olaf Lorenz, Head of International Marketing at Konica Minolta, to discuss how bizhub technology has evolved over the past 20 years to meet the changing needs of today's modern workplace. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Louella, and thanks for having me.
So before we get into the conversation, can you tell us a bit about your career history and your role at Konica Minolta?
I'm now 25 years within the Konica Minolta European headquarter. I started at the European headquarter in the first place. I started as a product manager, then I got a small team responsible for the product marketing. That was extended to the entire marketing division, and including 2004, when we kind of started the first attempts for professional printing. I have been working around the equipment, the portfolio of Konica Minolta, including all the solutions. And since now 2011, I'm a member of the European board. And since 2018, I'm even a member of the Konica Minolta Inc., our headquarter, with a marketing branding role. So that's why it has been quite a while. And that's why I think I am also very much can explain about the 20 years anniversary of the bizhub brand, because I was at the beginning of that, very deeply involved, even as a product manager.
Yeah, so great career history. And as you say, you've been involved with the bizhub technology from the beginning. So given that it's been around for 2 decades, looking back, what would you say are some of the most significant changes you've witnessed in the printing industry, and how has Konica Minolta evolved and adapted to these shifts? And perhaps you could also share an example of how bizhub has really sort of innovated.
Yeah, I think one of the key criteria when we started the entire connection of the MFP, or when you even think back, a copier that got connected to the network, that was being seen then as a printing device. And meanwhile, it's truly an IoT device that can come with all the threads that any IoT device can also be there. So that's why when I think about the past and today, of course, in 20 years ago, when we launched even the bizhub brand, we were more thinking to be this as an output device. So that's why a lot of the documents that have been created in a corporate network was supposed to be printed. Meanwhile, things have been changing very much towards more into an input device. So that's why you start your scanning workflows. You do your indexing, you do a lot of topics that are regarded as a document workflow process. And the starting point is such kind of MFP device. So I think that's the biggest change. And when thinking about the technology that has been truly accompanied with combining those desires, was our internet browser. We could suddenly connect also to web services in a much stronger way. So that's why the so-called AWS technology that gave us possibilities to bring apps to the device, that opened up the cloud connectivity. And meanwhile, I think most of our services are being even operated from the cloud and within the cloud. That's the strongest connection we can make. And at the same time, I mentioned the IoT device. Yeah, so being an IoT device, of course, the vulnerability troubles that coming alongside of this is, of course, also something we should not ignore within our industry. So that's why a multifunction device is at the same time also a threat to the network. And here we build also very solid technology, such as the bizhub Secure, in order to make the device more secure from a network connection viewpoint. I think the cloud connection and the cloud convergence, which we have been bringing into our MFPs, and the security angle, I think these are the biggest achievement that has been coming alongside of those 20 years from my viewpoint.
Yeah, and I think you raise a really good point around the bizhub technology and the connectivity. And I think Konica Minolta was one of the first vendors to really focus on the intelligent, connected workplace and sort of building the technology around the cloud connectivity, workflow automation. And you touched there on security. So in terms of what you're seeing in terms of customer adoption, because they do face these complex range of challenges around security, sustainability, digitization. What would you say are the key challenges your customers are facing, and how is Konica Minolta addressing that?
Yeah, well, I think it starts maybe more and more we can feel that sustainability angle. Yeah, so that even from a lot of the regulations, outside regulations, are forcing also our clients to think about sustainability in a stricter way. And of course, the way to print less, to have a print less work environment is something that we have been fostering also for quite some time. But of course, we have also a lot of settings in our device that encourage the user to work more on an environmental choice. For instance, a duplex by default, N-ups, so that you print multiple pages on one side. We are not necessarily enforcing the color print, so stay monotone if it's necessary. So that is a very strong aspect which we have since long already in our even our managed print services offering. But more importantly, as the economy is also changing towards the more used equipment, we have been also now, meanwhile, in the third year, we have our brand bizhub Refresh, which is a refurbished line, which still gives clients the possibility to use already like a first life into a second life generation. So I think these two aspects at the moment probably driving our sustainable action when it comes to device itself. Of course, the organization can deliver much more as we're thinking also beyond environmental. So we have a strong ESG principle. And we are trying to bring in also the ESG into most of the customer-facing discussion. But when talking about the portfolio and our equipment, I think settings in the device to avoid paper being unnecessarily spent, and the fact that we can also give our devices a second life through the bizhub Refresh brand. These are the two key components which we are looking here.
So in terms of customer priorities and what you're actually seeing within your customer in terms of their requirements, are you seeing that their sort of decisions around modernizing their print environment is driven by sustainability over security? And are they potentially, I guess, they're looking to digitize their paper-based processes? So I'm just curious as to what you're seeing in the market. And I know you've got a very diverse range of customers.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And let's also rewind here. I think the strongest desire at the moment is the digitization process. Yeah, so how to digitize or help digitizing paper-based processes to become more electronic, to get the unstructured data out of a document, and probably helping also clients to put structure into those data. And the structured data, of course, in the final end is a true information towards the client. And a lot of people talking about the gold, the data gold. And so that's why that is probably the highest desire when we're thinking about the everyday situation. But as I said, the environmental angle probably second choice, because if we can help through those digitization process, we can also help to reduce paper-based workflows, and that's also good for the environment. And last but not least, the point of the security, that is the entire, we call it also endpoint security. So to think about the endpoint security here, but as well also to, of course, protecting documents, data, I just said before, in a meaningful way, so that also document protection is being in our forefront. But thinking about the order, I would say digitization requirements, sustainability comes alongside of it, and then the security concern and how we can address those possible security concerns in a meaningful way.
What we're seeing generally in our research is when organizations, and it does obviously depend on whether it's a small business, medium business, or a large enterprise, but generally digitization is the top priority in terms of optimizing processes, reducing costs around paper-based processes. But I think, as you say, the sustainability also has a cost benefit and an efficiency benefit. So if they deploy, for example, the second life devices that you mentioned, that not only reduces environmental impact, but also helps them achieve their sustainability goals. And if they're reducing paper, organizations are ultimately reducing costs. So we're really seeing a perfect storm around some of these priorities in terms of modernising the print environment. In terms of the solutions, and you touched on the sort of digitisation and workflow automation, clearly AI is the next thing that we can't really have a conversation without discussing AI. So what are the plans for Konica Minolta moving forward to continue to evolve, given that you're at this point of 20 years of bizhub technology, and how are you going to take it forward?
Yeah, Louella, that's a very good question, because I think meanwhile a lot of people know that Konica Minolta also partners very strongly with Microsoft, so that's why we have a kind of Microsoft first approach also within our clients' activities. And within there, we are running now several different activities that is linked to the AI usage. And one of the parts which I'm very proud of is something that has been recently came up. So we call it Scan to Teams, even though there is no such thing as Scan to Teams. What we are doing, we are using a connector that connects to SharePoint. So whenever documents are being scanned, they will be connected direct to your own SharePoint site. And from there, we use Power Automate tools to index the document, to even build custom workflows. And whatever is being then extracted, summarized, can then be forwarded via the Power Automate into your own Teams folder. So that's why we can also create here a very good environment where the documents as such will be extracted, summarized, and even can be manipulated depending on the workflow itself. But we are trying to work with something simplified from an end user viewpoint. Yeah, so not telling, okay, there are so many complex different things to be taken. We're just telling our easy to understand story by using the Power Automate features and using the Microsoft 365 ecosystem thoroughly for those activities. So that's one of the points which we are trying to do specifically when it comes to, or more generically, when we talk specifically, we are also looking at the moment to invoice processes. So we really deep dive into a kind of AI-based invoice process, and also here extracting the meaningful data for further activities. So that's why these two components, I would say, is driving at the moment a lot of the AI agenda, even at our side. But again, predominantly driven by the Microsoft AI toolset that has been also available to us as a strong partner of the Microsoft side.
Yes, Konica Minolta is clearly very strong in that sort of broader Microsoft ecosystem. And I know you've been a partner for some time. So it's great to hear how you're kind of leveraging their technology, and particularly the AI technology within products and solutions. And really, that's going to be the future, isn't it, in terms of having those capabilities to analyze documents, to optimize workflows and improve those kind of business related outcomes for customers. So that's really interesting to hear.
The point which I sometimes feel is a lot of things you can do with Microsoft even without needing any OEM in our print industry. But again, what is still necessary to remove the complexity. Yeah. So and again, I think that's also from within the print industry. This is something we can strive much stronger forward to remove the barriers, the technology barriers that probably sits with even small, medium-sized companies. And if we, again, take the MFP as a starting point for addressing those workflows, I think that could be a very good and very easy to follow principle for many of the clients. And that, in the end, will accelerate their transformation. And again, that's something which I feel is still underutilized by many of us, and we should play a much stronger role in that.
We definitely see in our research, and we often recommend that OEMs consider how they can make those devices part of that broader IoT ecosystem and IT technology ecosystem as well. So I think working with Microsoft is one key approach, isn't it? Because you get sort of that access to the sort of the broader platform ecosystem that customers are already working with. So we mentioned sustainability, and I just wanted to pick up on that again, because we are seeing that more organizations are prioritizing reducing environmental impact. And you mentioned a bit about the second life and the remanufactured strategy that Konica Minolta has. Could you share anything else around Konica Minolta's broader goals around net zero and how it's looking to reduce its carbon footprint, and perhaps at a device level, the use of recycled materials and so on? Because I think it's always useful to understand how different OEMs are prioritizing those.
That was my attempt when I was talking about the ESG. If you think broader around the product or outside of the product itself, we are trying to limit also the use of physical interaction. Yeah. So, and again, in these days, even our clients don't necessarily want to have another visit by Konica Minolta, neither from a sales viewpoint, nor necessarily from a service viewpoint. So that's why we call it the shift left. Yeah. So which is then, of course, also making colleagues within the Konica Minolta framework not necessarily traveling to the different places. So that's why the use of remote tools, the use of remote tool sets, portals, and so forth, we are enforcing right now. So to give even customers a much stronger as he, she want at the time he, she want principle. And when talking again about the product and about the sustainability goals we are achieving here, of course, the amount of recycled material, outer cover recycled material, we are now trying to increase to a percentage that goes up to 80% of the entire outer plastic parts. And of course, we are also at the moment even investigating how much of the frame, the metal that is being used when manufacturing the equipment can even come into another manufacturing life cycle. So that part is there. But talking about the percentage, we are predicting at the moment that almost 20% by the end of this fiscal year, and our fiscal year stops at the end of March, will come from already refurbished machine. And that number might go up even to a number of 40%. And we have to admit that these days, it's like with any iPhone. So the next one that is coming doesn't necessarily offer so many different new features. So I think the maturity in our market also for those connected IoT devices is very strong. So that's why you don't necessarily need the latest, greatest and another latest, greatest. So that's why many of the clients are fine with existing technology and the maturity of those services that are being brought by those devices. So that's why we can clearly see a pick also for utilizing more of those refurbished or remanufactured devices going forward. And I think that's a trend that will be ongoing. And of course, we would like to accommodate. But of course, as I said, we try to make the devices themselves also more and more sustainable when it comes to the first life already. And that's why the percentage of recycled material is definitely one of the strong agendas here.
Yes, and that sort of extending the longevity of the device is absolutely key, isn't it, in the print industry? But that's, again, a really good point because, with any technology now, most of it is good enough for purpose or fit for purpose. And, many customers don't necessarily want to go through that 3 or even 5 year refresh that most companies have been used to in the past, whether it's PCs or print. But at the same time, there's, with AI, that's also pushing technology refreshes, and we are seeing that more organizations are starting to, with their print devices, looking at how long they can keep those for, and it also means they're minimizing their operational costs as well. And that obviously gives Konica Minolta the opportunity to drive more circularity around its product life cycle as well by bringing those old devices back into use. So I think it's going to be a really interesting time because I think we're seeing sustainability is obviously taking a bit of a battering at the moment with what's been happening in the sort of geopolitical scene. And I think sustainability reporting is still quite key, particularly in Europe, and for organizations to meet those goals and to have the right data. The information that you just shared is really key for companies to understand. More transparency around the devices, what recycled materials they use, device longevity, as you say, energy efficiency, and so on. And I just wanted to pick up also on that point you mentioned about service intervention and trying to reduce the time service engineers are on the road or having to make visits to clients. And I know you've got this remote service platform, called, is it AirE-Link?
AirE-Link, yeah, AirE-Link, yes.
And could you tell us a bit more about that? Because I think there's some really interesting statistics. I know it was launched in 2020, but I know you've got some sort of data about how much engineer time has been saved in terms of traveling and so on. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, well, the base principle for that is as any end user might use a smartphone, him or herself. And as many times, even the human can be the human error factor in reporting something. So what we have been doing, we have been building a platform where an individual can use on-site his her smartphone, point to a problem that she is facing, or at least we call it make it the eyes of the remote engineer, so that the smartphone can act as the eyes of a remote engineer. And by that, we will be able to eliminate as much as 80% of the first visit calls, because in most of the cases still these days, it's the paper jam that our client probably can't find easily him or herself. It's the simple reboot that is sometimes being necessary, and the end user, the client, not necessarily find where's the main power switch, where's the sub power switch. So through those exercises, we can help in the office world. But if we extend this even to our professional print equipment, we can really give our remote engineer can give practical tips in order to replace a fusing unit or replace an image transfer valve. So that's why it gives the true professional support. And I sometimes compare it even more and more. It's becoming popular also that you go to a virtual doctor. Yeah, so you have an online doctor's appointment, and also the doctor can talk through the camera to you and try to examine yourself. I'm trying to compare the situation in a very similar way, because that's the way how we can probably get much better understanding about the on-site situation before sending an engineer and then finding out it was an unnecessary visit because it was just a small and minor topic that could have been solved by anyone. So that's why those statistics has been very strongly in terms of our visit avoidance. But again, it's the manufacturer that talks about the visit avoidance. If you talk from an end user viewpoint, she get instant help. Yeah, so that's why the downtime has been massively eliminated. So that's another KPI which we are trying to emphasize very strongly, that we through all these different tools and tool sets and even our remote services platform, we can maximize the uptime of the devices sitting at the client side. So it's not just our not visiting, but it's more the value proposition here sits that the client can use the equipment at maximum time.
It's a great application, I guess, of machine learning and AI, which I think is pretty well, established in the print industry in terms of using AI to help with predictive service. And just looking, I've just got some of the data points, and I'm just going to share them because I think they're really impressive. So in 2023, Konica Minolta estimated that 8,874 estimated issues were resolved, and over 8,750 hours of service technicians' travel time, 15,000 customer visits, and 480,000 kilometres saved, and 124 tonnes of CO2 avoided. So I just really wanted to share that because I think it really sort of validates not only the cost benefits, but the environmental impact. Looking ahead, it's been great to sort of understand more about the bizhub technology and how that's evolved. And clearly it's needed to evolve because the workplace is changing so rapidly with hybrid work, but also reduced demand for print volumes as well, and increased use of scanning and capture and so on. So it's been really helpful to understand how this hub technology is continuing to innovate and evolve to support those requirements. In terms of looking ahead, what are the key trends that you think will shape the future of the print industry, and how is Konica Minolta preparing for these changes?
I think the key trend going forward is the accelerated use of AI and the entire technology that comes alongside of it. And I don't think that necessarily anything we call today workflow will be looking very much different in 2 years from now. Whenever we talk about workflow, we think about a linear process. Yeah, so something happens at one place and then it will be transferred. But thinking about the use of AI, you can do multiple things at the same time. So that's why a workflow in future probably is nothing that is such as linear. So that's why, again, what we believe will be our strong point is to manage the complexity even the IT complexity at the client side with a more simplistic viewpoint, and this seamless integration of the printing devices into those AI workflows is something that we would like to foster. Other than that, of course, I would still think that printing will not disappear completely. And I also used the chance. 2019, I spent myself a lot of time to research or read a lot of research documents about how the human brain has been acting. And still these days, I witnessed, even with my kids that are now even grown-ups that are entering the business, they feel something strong with certain print documents, because it's easier for the brain to encapsulate and to digest information, and it's not necessarily or doing a brain drain by reading long time in front of a PC screen. So that's why I'm pretty sure we will see more and more workflows that will just completely disappear to be paper-based. But on the other hand, we still see the necessity that certain documents still for reader friendliness need to be printed. And what is the key challenge for the MFP industry is to accelerate the one and still keeping access to the other documents. So that's why I think printing will reduce significantly, but will not go away completely. And in that transition, of course, we should help the clients again to minimize the output necessity and helping to digitize the part. So that's why our role in 5 years from now is probably more sitting on the fact that we are dealing with the data that we have been encapsulating from all the paper-based processes, and give clients a more meaningful way to access the data and make them become more intelligent, to give more innovation to their businesses. And that's what we would like to help as Konica Minolta here.
Yeah, I totally agree around the future of print. And I think, as you say, there's two kind of key potential scenarios, isn't there? In terms of office printing, I think that's pretty well acknowledged that that's flat to declining, a contracting market, but equally high value print and the need to use printed documents for reference. And, I think our affinity to the printed page isn't going to go away. But as you say, it's the role of the OEMs to really encapsulate that and be there to support that transition. And also the point you made about data and really uncovering the data opportunities that resides on paper and putting that into workflows. That's really where the differentiation is going to come for vendors in the industry. So it's great to hear Konica Minolta's perspective on that, and that's really the journey that you're embarking on as well. I think we've covered everything. It really brings us to the end of a really interesting conversation to hear more about the bizhub technology journey and celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. It's when I think about it, that was only in 2005, which seems a lot longer ago for some reason. But
well, that's the same year, so it sounds like almost yesterday, but it's already 20 years. And also what we use even for the internal talks. And again, I was part of the introduction to the European market. At that time, the term bizhub comes from business hub. And the slogan at that time, 20 years ago, was put yourself at the hub of your business. And if you look into that marketing message 20 years ago, it's more relevant today than it was even 20 years ago. Yeah, as I said, it was rather seen as an output device that sits somewhere. Meanwhile, this business hub is a good articulation of what we can do with our devices, with technology, with all the cloud connections. So that's why that evolution, of course, looking back into the 20 years, that has been coming massively, and the hybrid workplace you have been mentioning, which was, of course, 20 years ago also a different.
So that brings us to the close of today's conversation. I want to thank Olaf Lorenz for providing some great insight into the evolution of the bizhub technology and how it's adapted to the requirements of today's modern workplace. Thanks again for joining me today, Olaf.
Thank you very much, Louella.
Thank you for joining today's episode of In the Spotlight with Quocirca. For more information, please go to quocirca.com and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks again for joining, and I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.